crochet cute things. Happy holidays, happy new year. This is the very last project for 2024 and I wanted to make this extra special, super festive, and very cozy. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a cozy cardigan and a matching baby doll top. If you're here to just make the cardigan, that's great. If you're here to just make the top, that's great as well. It's gotten really cold over here in Bahrain, so I have used very chunky wool yarn, but if you don't have access to this yarn or you can't purchase it from Amazon, I will put the link in this video's description. Please keep in mind that you can use basically any yarn weight that you want and you can pair it with any hook size that you want because this pattern is 100% made to measure. This means that regardless of whatever yarn and hook size you're using, you can make it the perfect fit for you. Whether you want it super oversized like mine or you want to do something a little bit fitted, you want to change the sleeve length, you want to change the overall length, you want to change the width, it is entirely up to you. I don't want to talk too much, so I've put up all the information on my website. You can just scroll down and find everything you need to there. And if you have any questions after that, please feel free to ask them in the comment section. But I do want to let you know that I can't give you an estimate of how much yarn you'll need based on the size that you want to make. Because once again, I don't know what length you're making it, what width you're making it, what your stitch tension is like. So I will put a recommended yarn amount and everything, but please keep in mind to take it with a grain of salt because I might be wrong. Before we get into this tutorial, I have some very exciting news to share. I have started channel memberships here on YouTube. So there's 2 different levels that everyone can join. There's besties and star supporters, and they both have a few different perks. I'll be posting 2 to 3 exclusive members only videos on there every month. Plus you'll have access to some special emojis and icons that only members can use. Think of it like us being on FaceTime. These are going to be very chatty, very fun. They're just going to be a behind the scenes look at my day-to-day life as a self-employed content creator. I'm 21 years old. I've got lots of cats, so there's going to be cat cameos. We're going to get over my fear of driving to new places. We're going to prep for new projects, start new projects, and of course you're going to get the first look at everything that I'm making. So while you're waiting for new tutorials, you'll have some extra crochet content on the side. I'd love to have you join me and become a member, so I'll put the link in this video's description and you can connect with me over there. Happy crocheting everyone, and I will see you very soon for our next video. I'm going to start by making the back panel, but the steps for the back panel and the front panels are the exact same. So both those pieces start in the same way and they have the same steps for the rows. So we're going to go ahead and make a slip knot. Here's how I like to do mine. And now you're going to go ahead and chain the length that you want for these panels. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 44 chains. And if you haven't already, please take a look at the measurements guide that's linked in this video's description. That's going to help you decide how wide and how long you want your cardigan and your top to be. Don't make these chains too tight. Try to keep them nice and loose, but also not too loose. So try to find that happy balance. Once you've got your desired length, so I've done 44 chains, we're going to go ahead and make one more chain, but this one's going to be super tight. This is the turning chain and it doesn't count as a stitch. That's why we're making it separately and it's not included in your total stitch count. Now we're going to be turning our chains to the back. So this is the front with the V's, and if you turn it to the back, you're going to notice that there's middle bumps over here. So let's look at this chain. So the second chain from my hook, 1, 2, I'm going to turn it to the back and I'm going to find the middle bump. So that's 1, 2, and 3. So this one right over here is the middle bump. So we're going to yarn over slip stitch into the middle bumps of all the stitches at the back of the chains. Yarn over and insert your hook into this middle bump. So you're going to have to use your fingers. Then you're going to pull up a loop, and then using that same loop, you have to slide it through the other 2 loops on your hook. So I like using my fingers to help me out here because it's a little bit tricky. And there you go, that's your very first stitch of row 1. So let's do this one more time. You're going to yarn over. This is my next chain, 1, 2, and 3. So this is the middle bump. I'm going to go into it, pull up a loop, and then slide that same loop through the other 2 loops on my hook. Let's do this one more time. Yarn over, insert your hook into the middle bump of the backs of the chain, pull up a loop, and then slide that same loop through the other 2 loops on your hook. So that's what your work should look like. I'm going to do a few more and show you what it looks like again. I'm almost to the end of my row and this is what I have so far. It's quite a long piece. Keep in mind that at the end of your work, you're going to have a short little piece at the bottom for ribbing. Now, the length of the ribbing is entirely up to you. So my ribbing is going to be as long as 5 stitches. So at the bottom of my work, when I have 5 stitches left, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I'm going to be turning these into ribbing. So the steps for these chains are going to be different than the rest of my work at the top. So it's entirely up to you. If you think this is too short for the ribbing, you can go ahead and make it as long as 6 stitches, 7 stitches, even up to 10 stitches. It's entirely up to you and whatever look you prefer. So when you're working on the ribbing, we're going to be doing single crochets instead of the yarn over slip stitch. So you're going to insert your hook into the backs of the chains just like we were doing before, but this time you're going to single crochet. So pull up a loop and then yarn over and pull through the other 2 loops that are on your hook. Now I'm going to do this into the remaining chains that I have left over here. For the ribbing, we're going to be doing a single crochet with slip stitch ribbing. So there's lots of different ways, but this is the one that I like to do for the back panel and the front panel. I think it makes it look a little bit different than the top of the piece, and it adds a nice little texture. Now we're going to be starting our second row. Every time you want to start a new row, you're going to chain 1, make sure that this is tight, don't make it too loose, and then you're going to turn your work this way. Keep in mind that your chain 1 never counts as a stitch, so don't insert anything into this ever. So we are still working on the bottom ribbing piece, so however many stitches you did, you're going to be working into them with a slip stitch. So I'm going to be working to the very first stitch, and you have to find the back loop. So this is the front loop and this is the back loop. I know it's a little bit confusing. This is your chain 1, completely ignore that. First stitch, front loop, back loop. We are going to be inserting our hook into the back loop. So right over here, just grabbing onto one loop and not both of them. Then you're going to pull up a loop and slide that same loop through the other one on your hook, and that is your slip stitch. So let's go into the next stitch, grab onto the back loop only, and slip stitch. Let's do this one more time, back loop only, and slip stitch. This is going to be my 4th slip stitch, and there's my 5th slip stitch. Since I only did 5 single crochets, I only need to do 5 slip stitches. And now I'm done working on the ribbing portion. Now we're going to go back to doing those yarn over slip stitches that we were doing before. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop of the stitch, pull up a loop, and then slide that same loop through the other 2 loops on your hook. Now we're going to continue this all the way to the end of the row. So you're going to keep going all the way up to the top. Make sure that your yarn over slip stitches are not too tight, not too loose. So try to find, again, that happy balance. Depending on your tension, depending on how tight or loose your stitches are, your measurements may vary from mine. So if you're doing it the same as mine, please remember that yours can still end up different from my measurements. This is what the ribbing portion should look like, and then this is what the rest of your row should look like. Now that we're done with row 2, we're going to repeat the same steps for row 3. So you're going to chain 1 tightly and turn your work. Remember that we're going to completely ignore the chain, so we're going to be working into the very first stitch, which is this one over here. So we're going to be yarn over slip stitching into the back loop. So yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop, and yarn over slip stitch just like before. So that's your very first stitch of row 3. Now you can just go ahead and yarn over slip stitch into the back loops of every stitch until you reach the bottom part where you have your ribbing. It's always good to keep in mind how many stitches you have for the bottom of the ribbing, so you can just count and stop there, or you can even use a stitch marker to mark it so that you don't lose track or you miss some stitches. I'm at the end of my work. I have 5 stitches left, so now it's time to work on the ribbing. So when you're coming downward, so when you're coming to the end of your work and your ribbing is over here, you're going to be doing single crochets into the back loops of every stitch. So now I'm going to do 5 single crochets, 1, 2, and 5. So now we're done with row 3. To start a new row, once again, we're going to chain 1 tightly and turn our work. So now when you're working from the bottom to the top and your ribbing is over here, you're going to be doing slip stitches into the back loops of every stitch. So you're going to find the back loop, insert your hook through it, and then you're going to slip stitch just like that. So once again, the same number of stitches that you did for the ribbing. So for me, that's 5. So I'm going to do 5 slip stitches. And here's my last one, 5. Once the portion for the ribbing is done, you can go back to yarn over slip stitching in the back loops of every stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook, and yarn over, slip stitch. Now you're going to go ahead and do this all the way till the very top, and then after that, that's just about it. You're just going to keep repeating these steps until your panels are as wide as you want them to be. So your back panel is going to be from shoulder to shoulder. If you want a super oversized fit, then it's going to be way wider than your shoulders, which I recommend, so it's nice and cozy. Now you can see the difference a little bit more clearly. So the top of your work, or the main piece, has these little spaces in between, but then your ribbing at the bottom is just closer together. So that makes like a fun little texture difference. Now I'm ready to start my next row. So I've chained one, and once again, I'm going to turn my work, and there we go, guys. You're just going to repeat all the steps that I showed you. So you can go ahead and replay row 3 and row 4 and just follow along from there. Once you get the hang of it, and once you recognize the pattern that you're following, it's going to be really easy and very mindless. Just make sure that your stitches remain even, not too loose, not too tight. Try to keep the same tension. So I'm going to yarn over slip stitch in the top part of my work, and then once I reach the bottom piece where my ribbing is, I'm going to single crochet. Then I'm going to start a new row, turn my work around, then I'm going to slip stitch, yarn over slip stitch all the way to the very top of my work. And then once again, repeat the same steps. So go ahead and put on the audiobook that you were listening to, or watch your comfort show, or put on a fun movie, and you're just going to go ahead and crochet until the panels are as wide as you want them to be. So this can be any number of rows as long as you like the fit and the size of it. Once you have the desired width, I'm going to show you how to fasten off your work. So go ahead and get your scissors, and also get your needle that we're going to use for weaving in the end. So please remember that the steps for fastening off and weaving in your ends are the same for everything. So just go ahead, and you're going to chain one and pull, then tighten to secure, then insert the yarn through the needle and make a knot to secure it in place. Go ahead and weave in your end. So I like to go through the stitches very randomly and pull. I'm just going to go through the stitches and pull. I'm going to keep doing this until a lot of the yarn is weaved in. So there's no right or wrong here. The more you do it, the more secure your work will be. And you'll also have this end to basically fix up any mistakes if your work unravels, which it shouldn't, but in case it does. Last one, and then I'm just going to cut the extra, and we're done. This is going to be a little bit messy, but here is my first front panel. Here is my second front panel. I've already sewed it onto the back panel. So you should have 2 front panels and 1 big back panel. So you have to make sure that your front panels can go along the sides of your back panel, and there should be some space in the middle for your head or your neck to fit through. So make sure that your front panels don't completely cover the back panel. I have like 7-8 rows in between, and this is the perfect amount of space for me, but you can make this part wider, you can make it smaller. When we're sewing, you have to make sure that your work is turned to the wrong side. So this is my wrong side. So I'm going to keep this one over here as well, and now I'm going to sew this together. So go ahead and get your needle and attach it to a long string of yarn. This is pretty long, so maybe double the width of your front panel. I'm going to take my needle, and I'm going to put it through the edges right over here. There's no specific place, you just have to get as close to the edge as you can, and then the edge of the other panel as well. Then I'm going to pull until there's a little bit of a string left over here. Now we're just going to sew this together. So I'm just going to do a basic running stitch. So I'm going to go through the edges here, and then through the edge of the back panel, and pull again. You have to make sure that you're lining up your work. So you have to line up each row to each other. So this is my first row, lined up to the first row here. I've zoomed in a little bit over here to show you. I'm going to go through the edge like this, and then the edge of the other piece. So I don't just try to grab onto one loop, I try to grab onto like a whole chunk so it's extra secure. And then I'm going to pull and tighten. Remember not to tighten it too much, otherwise it's going to bunch up. So let's do this one more time. So I'm not going to grab onto just this loop, because look, that's going to leave a little bit of a hole. So I'm going to grab onto this little chunk over here, and then try to find a chunk over here as well, like right there, and then pull. When you're done and you're ready to end your work, go ahead and grab your scissor. Don't pull all the way through. Insert your needle through that little loop and then tighten. So that's going to make a knot. I think that's super secure. So I'm going to go ahead and make a few more knots, maybe through the stitches. So 2 or 3 should be good. And pull. Now we're going to take this leftover string and we're going to weave it in. So just go ahead and insert your needle through stitches randomly and keep doing this until you have only a little bit of string left. Once you're done, just cut your work and you're done. So you've got your one side and then you've got your other side, and oh wait, we forgot about this side over here. So for this, just go ahead and reattach your needle. Go ahead and make a knot to secure this end. So I'm just going to go through this and then pull, but then leave a little bit of a hole, go through that hole and tighten. So that's going to make a knot. Now I'm going to weave it in and then cut the extra. The sleeves have the same steps. The only difference is the ribbing at the bottom. So you're still going to make a slip knot and chain whatever length you want. Then you're going to yarn over, slip stitch into all of the stitches. But when you reach the end, you're going to do the ribbing a little bit differently. We're not going to do single crochets and slip stitches. We're only going to do slip stitches in the back loops. So this is what the ribbing for the panels looks like, and this is what the ribbing for the sleeves looks like. It's tighter so we can have like a little cuff at the end. You're going to make the sleeves as wide as you want. I'm going to show you how to do this, don't worry. So you're going to make it whatever length you want by chaining whatever length you want, and then you're going to keep doing rows until the sleeves are as wide as you want when you fold it like this. So as I said, I'm just doing yarn over slip stitches into all of the stitches until I get to the part where I have my ribbing. So this time for the ribbing, I made it as long as 6 stitches. So before I was doing 5 stitches for the ribbing, and now I'm going to be doing 6. Now I have 6 stitches left at the end, and I'm just going to slip stitch. So no more yarn over slip stitches, just insert your hook into the back loop and do a regular slip stitch. And I like to make these super tight and not loose. So I'm just going to do 6 slip stitches, then we're going to start a new row. When you're starting a new row, the steps are the same, just chain one tightly and turn your work around. And once again, we're just going to slip stitch into the back loops of every stitch. So I'm going to do 6 slip stitches again, very tightly. And that is just about it. So instead of doing the single crochet and then slip stitch, you're only doing tight slip stitches. And once you're done with your stitches for the ribbing, you can go back to doing those yarn over slip stitches. So yarn over, insert your hook, and slip stitch. And I'm going to do this all the way to the top. Start my row like we always do. Yarn over slip stitch all the way down until I come back to the ribbing area, and then just slip stitch into the back loops and repeat. So once again, very repetitive, just did a little bit different from what we did for the other panels. Once you have the number of rows that you want for the sleeve and it's the size that you want when you fold it like this, you're going to be slip stitching the edges closed. To do this, fold your work in half, and wherever you ended your work with, you're just going to make this loop a little bit tighter by pulling it. Grab the other piece and you're going to insert your hook through the 3rd loop. So there's going to be 1, 2, and the 3rd loop at the bottom, or basically this loop all over here. So you're going to insert your hook through it, and then you're going to yarn over and pull that through. So that's how we're going to do the very first. Now after that, we're going to insert our hook into the 3rd loop of the stitch, and then the back loop of this row over here. So you're going to go through the back loop and then just slip stitch through. So once again, we're going to go through the 3rd loop and then the back loop and then slip stitch, pull it through. This is what you should have when you reach all the way to the end, and then just chain one, fasten off, and weave in the ends just like what we did for the other panels. The next step is to sew everything together. So first I'm going to start sewing from the bottom all the way up, and then over here I've put a little stitch marker to tell me that this is where I'm supposed to start sewing the sleeves. So I'm going to go all the way around sewing the sleeves into this armhole that we have over here. And so go ahead and grab your needle. I've attached the yarn to my needle. It's a pretty long string, so I just took as much as I could get. I think it's like wrapped around this area 4 times. Here's how I'm doing the sewing. I'm just going to insert my needle through the stitch on the side and then grab onto the corresponding stitch on the other side. So making sure that I go through the back panel as well as the front panel, and then I pull and repeat. So same as what we did for sewing the front panel to the top of the back panel. Now I'm ready to start joining this to the sleeves. So I'm going to go through a stitch like that, and then I'm going to just stretch this out and go through the corresponding stitch over here. I'm going to try and grab onto the edge like that and pull. And sew all the way around. We're not joining this together, otherwise your hand will not be able to fit through the sleeve. Once again, I'm going to go through the stitch in the sleeve and then go through a stitch in the panel. It's going to take a while to get the hang of, and then pull. Let's do this one more time, and then you can go ahead and just sew all the way around. So grab onto a stitch in the front panel, grab onto a little space in the sleeves because there's no proper stitches there, and then just pull. Once you're done, we're going to fasten off our work just like what we did for all the other pieces. So the steps are the same, we just have a bunch of different pieces to work with. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a knot. So pull it through, but don't go all the way through, and insert your needle through that loop. Then you can go ahead and pull, and it's gonna make this knot over here. Now with the rest of the leftover yarn, we're just going to weave in the end, so you can go through any little stitches, any little loops, until you only have a bit of the yarn left. And there we go, we are done with one side. For the baby doll top, the pattern is very similar to this other baby doll top that I made. I just made a few minor adjustments to make the pattern a little bit easier, so if you're a beginner, this will still be okay for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started by making a slip knot. Here's how I like to do mine. And now you're going to go ahead and chain until the length of chains is long enough to wrap around your chest. I would recommend making this a little bit tight, so make sure it's not too loose, otherwise the top might fall off and, you know, be too loose. So just keep chaining until this can wrap around your chest. This is just going to be a short demonstration piece. It's not my actual piece for the top. Alright, so once you've got the measurement that you want, we are going to be inserting a slip stitch into each of these chains. And to make it a little bit neater, I'm going to turn my chains to the back side. And we're going to be inserting our hook into the middle bump of the chain. So that's 1, 2, and 3. So this middle bump over here. I'm going to completely skip this first chain because that's going to be like our turning chain. I'm going to turn my chains around and insert it into this middle bump over here. And then pull up a loop and then slide that same loop through the other loop on my hook. So that's going to be our very first slip stitch. Now I'm going to insert my hook into this bump of the second chain right over here. And then I'm going to slip stitch again. So you're going to go ahead and just slip stitch into each one of your chains. So try to keep an even tension when you're slip stitching. So make sure that they're all the same tension, so not too loose, not too tight. When you're done inserting a slip stitch into all of your chains, that is going to be your very first row. Now we're going to start our second row. Every time you want to start a new row, you're going to chain 1. Make sure that this is super tight, and turn your work around. So this is what your work will look like from the side, and this is what your work will look like from the top. So we're going to be always inserting our hook into the back loop. This is the front loop, this is the back loop. So you're going to go ahead and insert your hook into the back loop like this in the middle of the stitch, and then you're going to slip stitch. So from now on, the pattern is going to be very repetitive. All you have to do is insert 1 slip stitch into the back loop of every stitch, and then repeat for every row. So for the bodice, the texture is going to look a little bit like knit. It might take longer to work up because the stitches are so tight together, but trust me, the texture is so beautiful. All right, now I'm done with my second row. Let's start with our third row. So once again, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. So now we have to look at our work from the top where we can see the stitches. Remember, don't insert anything into your chain 1, it's just a turning chain. So this is my first stitch. That means I'm going to insert my hook into the back loop and slip stitch. This is how you're going to create the texture for the bodice. So just go ahead and insert 1 slip stitch into the back loops of every stitch. You're going to keep crocheting rows of slip stitches in the back loops only until this piece can cover your chest. So since it's a baby doll top, I would recommend from the top of your chest till slightly under so we can keep that silhouette. If you're still watching and you're confused as to why my piece is so small, please remember that this is just a demonstration piece. I'm going to make my actual piece much longer, and that piece is going to be long enough to wrap around my chest. So I'm done with the bodice. It's as wide as I want and can comfortably cover my chest, but if your piece like mine has shrunk, I didn't really take into account how tight the slip stitches would be. So here's how you're going to fix that if it's too small now and you don't want to frog your work. So don't worry, it's fixable. What we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch across this edge. So wherever your hook is, wherever you ended your last row, you're just going to slip stitch across that. So not on top of the stitches, but along the sides of it. So just slip stitch across the edges. Make sure that you're going through as close to the edge as possible. So there's no specific place to go through. I'm just doing this very randomly, just wherever my hook can fit through, as long as it's close to the edge. So slip stitch all the way down. Now we have these stitches at the top to help us make more rows. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to crochet rows of slip stitches until we have like a little bit of a stretchy panel over here that will make the bodice the size that can actually fit me, because right now it's way too tight. So you're just going to do the same thing as you did before. You're going to chain one to start a new row. Sorry about that. And turn your work. And then we're going to do the first row a bit differently. So you know how you would slip stitch into the back loop? We're actually going to slip stitch into the front loop, but just for the second row, so that the slip stitches actually start forming properly. Because if you start from the back row, they're going to start building on top of your bodice instead of to the side of it. So just grab onto the front loop, which is this one over here, the one that's closest to you, this right here, and slip stitch. That's what it should look like from the front when you're done. Now to start a new row, just repeat the steps that we did before. So chain one and turn your work. Now you're just going to be slip stitching into the back loops, just like what we did before. You can continue slip stitching into the front loops, so that would look like this. So you can just keep doing that if it's easier. I honestly think I might just do that. But if you want to do it the same way that we did before, then you're going to slip stitch into the back loop, which is going to give you the same texture that you have for the bodice. Okay, that's actually not bad. I think I'm going to do just slip stitch in the back loops only. So I'm going to keep crocheting rows of this until I have that little stretchy panel that I talked about. This is my stretchy panel, the front side. I tried to keep my stitches loose, but it still became a little bit smaller. So that's the size of the back, and then this is the stretchy panel. So what we have to do next is slip stitch the side of your stretchy panel to the other side of your bodice. So to do that, we're just going to insert our hook into the edge of the other side and slip stitch like that. Now you're going to insert your hook through any space in the other edge, and then you're going to insert your hook through the slip stitch on the stretchy panel, and then you're going to slip stitch that together. So insert your hook and then insert your hook through the slip stitch. This is a struggle because the stitches are really tight and the hook is really big, so I am struggling. But yeah, we're basically just going to slip stitch all the way down, and because this is longer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it out and then align each stitch to each little corner over here. So I'm going to show you one more time before I go and struggle to do that. I'm going to insert my hook through, go through the slip stitch, and then slip stitch again. So go ahead, go do this all the way down. Once you're done, your top should fit way more comfortably now. Now we're ready to start the actual rounds for the ruffles part. So what we're going to do is chain 2. So this is just going to start off our round, and we are going to be half double crocheting all the way around. So to half double crochet yarn over, insert your hook as close to the edge as you can get, pull up a loop, and then you'll have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3 of those loops. Now go ahead and just half double crochet all the way around. It's nothing special, it's just regular half double crochets. So when you're in the space, that's kind of like your stretchy space, you just have to try and get as close to the edge as possible. But then once you reach the actual bodice, so where we've got our rows of slip stitches, it's going to be a little bit different. So let me just catch up to that. So here's what we're going to do. This is the front of your work, and you've got your slip stitch here. If you turn it to this side, you're going to see the 3rd loop. So we're going to go into the 3rd loop. That's a stitch, the V, 1, 2. and 3. So this one right over here. So you're going to yarn over and insert your hook into it. Sorry, I think I'm getting a little bit of a cold, so if I sound weird, that's why. And then you're just going to half double crochet into that, and now you're going to do this all the way around. So insert your hook into this 3rd loop and half double crochet. If this is too hard, please just feel free to half double crochet into the slip stitch regularly. These are just some extra steps that are sometimes unnecessary, but I like to take them because they make my work look a little bit neater. Once I came all the way around, I just flipped my work inside out. So this is the other side of my work, and it looks really neat. I love it. Now we're going to end this round, and then we're going to start the round for our ruffles. Go ahead and find those chain 2 that you did and insert your hook into the 2nd chain or the chain at the top, and then slip stitch to end the round. Now we're going to start the next round. So we're going to chain 3. Sorry, we're going to chain 2, not 3, and then we're going to double crochet back into the same stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into that same stitch, pull up a loop, then yarn over, pull through 2. Oh, you guys can't even see what I'm doing. And then yarn over, pull through 2. I'm going to show you again. So we're basically going to be repeating the pattern of 1 double crochet and then 2 double crochets in the next stitch all the way around. So we did our first double crochet. Now in the next one, we have to insert 2 double crochets into the same stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's your first double crochet. Now go back into that same stitch and insert your 2nd double crochet. This is how we're going to get those ruffles. Now we're going to repeat this all the way around. So we're going to do 1 double crochet, and then in the next stitch we're going to do 2 double crochets into that same stitch. And repeat 1 double crochet and then 2 double crochets. Once you're done, you're going to start noticing that your work has pretty little ruffles like this. Now here's how you're going to end your round. So this is what I like to do. I don't know if it's right, but it just works for me. So I'm going to skip the first 2 chains that we did, and I'm going to go into the first double crochet stitch, and then I'm going to slip stitch. After that, I'm going to chain 2 and then double crochet back into that same place where I just slip stitched. So like that. And now, from now on, the steps are pretty repetitive. We're just going to do rounds of 1 double crochet into every stitch. So if you do want your work to be a little bit more ruffly, you can repeat the pattern that we did in the previous round. But other than that, you can just go ahead and keep doing as many rounds as you want until the top is as long as you want it to be. If you've done rounds before, then you're probably confused as to why I didn't turn my work. I just like the texture that this gives way more than when I turn my work and then it goes all the way around. So it's just up to personal preference. So when you're ready to end your work, just slip stitch into the double crochet to end your round like normal, and then chain 1, leave a bit of an extra string and go ahead and cut the rest. And then we're gonna weave this in. So you're just gonna take your plastic needle and you're gonna take this end that we have here and you're gonna weave it into the back of your top. Now I'm gonna show you how to make the strap. The strap is completely optional. I wasn't gonna make it, but I think it's just better to have it in case I change my mind later. I also don't have much yarn left, so I think it's better to just use it. So to do this, what I did was try the top on, and then I put a stitch marker where I wanted the strap to basically start. And then I asked my sister to measure from, while the top was still on, I asked her to measure from here till the back where the top was reaching. And she told me it was 11 centimeters. I think this is centimeters. Sorry, inches. 11 inches. And so now I'm going to make the strap 11 inches long, but I think I'm actually going to do 10 inches because the chains, they're going to stretch like this when I put it on. So I'm just going to make it 1 inch less than the measurement that we measured. So I've got my yarn over here. I'm going to insert my hook through the stitch that we marked with the stitch markers. And then I'm going to take my yarn, make a little loop with it, and slide that through. So I have a little bit of a long string over here that I'm going to use to weave in the ends later and tie a knot to secure it. So right now we're just going to start chaining. So I'm going to make my chains really, really tight. I've got 19 chains over here, and now we're going to slip stitch into this marked stitch over here. So just insert your hook through it and then make sure everything's straight. Are the chains straight? Okay, I think they are. So I've put my hook through there again. You're just going to take the yarn and you're going to slide it through the stitch as well as the one on your hook. And there you go, your strap should be all attached. Now I'm just going to do a few extra slip stitches into the stitches that are right next to where we just slip stitch, just to make it extra secure in case anything unravels. I'll have this extra bit of yarn to work with later. Now I'm just going to cut my yarn, leaving a bit of a string so I can weave it in. Also, I did show how to weave it in during the cardigan part of the video, so just watch that part if you're not sure how to do that. And there we go, we're done with the straps, we're done with the bodice and the ruffles, and you should have your perfectly fitted baby doll top.